All right, on with my autobiography, 7 Years to Life. This is chapter 14, and the title is Princess Bay 2. The summer of 1960 was the most memorable one that I've ever spent at Princess Bay. I can remember arriving at our rented bungalow, and though I was anxious to get started on my 2 months of summer, there was a subtle change happening to me, but I could not quite understand exactly what it was or why it was happening. I was not any different from other young boys when the carefree days of summer were ahead of me. It was not long before I stopped thinking about what was happening to me internally. I unpacked my clothes as fast as humanly possible and put what I would not need that particular day away. I put on my bathing suit and my t-shirt. Yes, I was one of those fat little boys at the time that needed to wear a t-shirt with my swimsuit in order to feel reasonably secure and eliminate any mortification that could take place. It did not work all the time, but it fulfilled its purpose most of the time. I was dressed for swimming and I started to jog towards the beach. I was anxious to run to the end of the pier and jump off into the water. On my way to the pier, I ran into some of my good summer buddies, and they did not even ask what I was up to. They already knew what my intentions were, so they started jogging with me. As we got to the beginning of the pier, the race was on to see which person would be the first to hit the water. It was a dead heat as we jumped off the pier and landed in the water. As we surfaced, we looked at each other, some of us laughing and some of us crying, because we did not know was that an oil tanker had sprung a small leak the previous day, and by the time we jumped off into the water, there was an oil slick waiting to greet us. We were covered in the stuff, to say the least. It was not the start of summer that we were anxious for. The good news was that we were going to be there for the next 2 months, and because of my good old swimming t-shirt, it took only 1 week to get myself fully cleansed as opposed to the 2 weeks it took the other boys. Additionally, another 2 weeks was required to eliminate the slick and make the water safe for swimming again, though I recall not being in a great hurry to see if the water was suitable yet. So, rather than swim the next day, we took our fishing poles out on the pier and decided at least we could do a little fishing. There were people on both sides of the pier, and they were casting their lines into the water. When you pier fish, the idea was to cast your line just far enough so it had some distance from the pier. It only takes a short sidearm cast in order to achieve the necessary distance. Every summer, there were newcomers or rookies, as I shall call them, that did not understand the art of a short sidearm cast, and invariably they would take their rod and flip it directly back over their shoulder completely. As these rookies soon found out that by bringing the rod directly back over your shoulder, it would naturally let out some line, and you could not see how much. Well, I was feeling pretty good being oil-free and fishing off the pier with some of my best buddies. That is, until I felt a fishing hook lodge itself in the back of my neck, and then came the tugging. I acted quickly and reached behind me to grab the line and stop the tugging, which I am quite sure prevented further damage that it could have possibly required stitches. The injury I sustained was actually a small one due to the fact that the hook used to catch the predominant fish in that area, such as snapper and flounder, were very tiny. I have to admit that the injury required some ointment and a small band-aid. However, the shock of the incident created a need for a small box of Kleenex. I started my summer by being dipped in oil and hooked like a flounder, so the only thing left was to clean and gut me and throw me on the grill. That afternoon, as I lay in my bed, that weird feeling that I could not identify started to consume my thoughts once again. As twilight approached, I heard some of my friends getting ready to head to the east side of the island, where the majority of the forest flourished. I knew they were on their way to play war games. With the unknown feelings I was experiencing, I decided to let them head east, and when I could hear them no longer, I decided to head west toward the yacht club. This side of the island was infinitely more serene than the east side, where the war games were taking place. About 30 yards past the yacht club was a spectacular structure in itself. I looked up the beach and could see these two mounds of sand, about 5 feet apart from each other, forming a makeshift alcove. I decided to take a closer look. I sat down in the center of the alcove and felt the walls on both sides of me. Apparently the walls were two fairly good-sized pieces of stone that over the years, depending on which way the wind blew, had a coating of sand very similar to sandstone. The sky was dark except for the stars. The waves slapped very lightly on the shore. The warm breeze blew at varying speeds, and the yachts with their ropes wrapped around the dock's moorings, stretching and contracting in conjunction with all of the above mentioned sounds, created a sort of rhythm section. Now the alcove seemed to be a tiny amphitheater. Listening to this actually created a rhythm section, and then looking up to the stars shining above, I was inspired to sing. As I was singing, I came to the realization that the feeling that had been haunting me for the past few days was one of unawareness of the beauty of Princess Bay. I sang a couple of my favorite hymns that night, and then I headed home. However, this time, I let the beauty of the sea, the land, the purple sky, and the warm summer breeze engulf me. I knew at that moment that part of maturity was developing a keen awareness of the incomprehensible universe that surrounded us. I absolutely love to sing, but I get the greatest pleasure when I'm singing alone, because for me it's therapy. It's not the desire to be famous or to perform, because having done so in the choir, I knew of those benefits. But it was a far cry from the release that how singing my heart out in private relaxed me. As the summer wore on, I began to slowly withdraw from the nighttime activities that used to thrill me. I became quite creative with the excuses that I would tell my friends. Actually, they were lies as to why I would not be able to play that evening. I would sneak off to my private little amphitheater, get the rhythm section that nature provided going, soak in the beauty, and begin to sing some of my favorite songs that I often practiced in my bedroom back in the city. It was so special because no one ever came by, and it was like my own private hideaway until one evening where I was discovered and forever placed this summer at Princess Bay as one of my fondest memories. One night, tucked away in my little amphitheater, I began singing Stand By Me. And as I was finishing the chorus where it goes, "Darlin', darlin'," someone joined in and sang Stand By Me. It startled me, and I turned around to find a young black girl staring at me and smiling. The reason I mentioned that she was black is because outside of Harlem, I had never been that close to a black person. Up until this point in my life, I can't recall ever talking to a black person. Anyway, her name was Lena, and she had been spying on me and listening to me sing for a few nights. She was around my age, and she lived with her father and mother in a nice apartment at the yacht club because her father was the maintenance supervisor there. I asked her why I had never seen her over on the other side by the forest, and she said, "I have to be honest with you. My father does not trust white people very much. He was born down in Alabama, and you know how that goes." She told me she kept herself busy by learning to play piano and helping her father around the yacht club. In fact, she discovered me when her father sent her outside to fetch some electrical wire that he needed. It goes without saying that I started spending more nights with my newfound friend, honoring her song requests, at least the ones I knew. I guess you could say she was my first girlfriend. We would hold hands and harmonize together, and I can't say there was a romantic feeling when doing this, but I can definitely assure you that I felt a wholesomeness that I did not know I was capable of. It was the night before my family and I were scheduled to head back to Woodside, and she requested that I sing Sealed with a Kiss. I asked her why that song, and she told me that besides the fact that she liked it, it was going to be her last summer at Princess Bay. She said that her mother had been nagging her father for 2 years, telling him that she wanted to go back to the hustle and bustle of the city. Lena told me that her mother was not telling the entire truth, because Lena's mother, in a moment of weakness, told her that she had been back to Harlem because there was nothing but white people in Princess Bay. I can't say I blame her, because it didn't take a genius to know that racism was alive and well in 1960. So we sang together holding hands, and just before it was time to say goodbye, I sang Sealed with a Kiss. For those of you who don't know the lyrics and are interested in knowing them, look them up on Google. The last thing she gave me was a peck on the cheek. It was not a sexual feeling that I felt from it. After all, I was only 10. But it was akin to the blood brother ritual that close male friends partake in, except it was with a girl. My father, who has been around the world close to 25 times, said often that next to Alaska, Princess Bay was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. I don't necessarily agree with that, because of the short time I spent in Mexico, I saw places that were far, far more beautiful. A few nights ago, my wife and I were watching a movie called Muscle Shoals. It was a recording studio in Alabama where some of the greatest musicians and singers that ever lived went to record. I am talking about people like Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, the Rolling Stones, and many others. They all echoed the same sentiment, that there was an inexplicable feeling and aura that emanated from the place and inspired some of the best work they have ever done. I'll just say it in one hippie term, and that is karma. I think it was my dad was trying to articulate about Princess Bay. I know he has been to many far more beautiful and exotic places, but none captured the spiritual warmth and loveliness of Princess Bay. Lena and I communicated by mail a few times over the following winter season. In fact, one time we spoke by telephone. She said to me to never stop singing, because she knew how it made life easier for me. If I ever get back to New York again, this time I will make a trip to Princess Bay, even though it will probably only be a shadow of its former self, but regardless, it will always hold a tiny amphitheater in my heart.